Okay. Sylvester's order. Life in the castle was monotonous. I would start my mornings in the winter playroom, where I would read, write new stories, and practice the Harspiel. Then I would go to the knight's training grounds for some light exercise and radio calisthenics. Of course, my education was too high, and my stamina levels too low for the other children to join me. So I ended up having to do it all on my own. Riarda had said it was important for me to remain in the playroom nonetheless, but I didn't really see why. It felt like nothing would change if I just stayed in my room. Am I not a bother to everyone else in the playroom, I asked? I stick out quite a bit, I feel. Of course not, Riarda replied. The winter playroom was established specifically so that the Archducal family could search for retainers. You have spent no time with the younger children due to your long sleep, milady. It is important that you socialize with them and come to learn their thoughts and personalities. It was correct. One needed opportunities to determine whether someone was suitable before taking them as a retainer. Otherwise, more tragic incidents were prone to happen. I feel that I have enough retainers already, though. My, milady, what are you saying? Cornelius and Hartmut are due to graduate this year. Then Lenore and Laisletta the year next. Your retainers in higher grades are going to leave the Royal Academy one after another, and if you do not replace them with younger students, you will not be able to function properly. You will need to pick at least 2 attendants, 3 guard knights, and 1 scholar from years below your own. That won't be easy, though. There was a surprising number of constraints here, like trying out to pick kids who were better suited as retainers in the future Giebs, or kids from other factions like Nicholas. Personally knowing someone didn't mean you could take them into your service. On top of that, I couldn't select any kids who had already been chosen to serve Wilfrid, Charlotte, or Melchior. Is there anything I could do to make this easier? In the afternoon, I went to the Archduke's office and sat at the desk for Wilfrid, where I read reports from the Royal Academy, sent replies when necessary, and assisted Sylvester with his work. It was my first time helping him, and it was actually a little bit fun. Ferdinand had given me the impression that Sylvester abandoned his work at every opportunity, but it seemed he was actually somewhat reliable now. His pride as a father had apparently kept him from running away once Wilfrid came to work alongside him, and at this point he had so much extra to do that he could no longer afford to ignore it. Being the Archduke is not easy, I see, I observed. You're the reason I have so much work to do in the first place, Sylvester replied, glaring at me despite my intention in having been to praise him. Wilfrid and Charlotte are both working hard, so it's only natural that you do as well. The scholars will appreciate this too, no doubt. In truth, part of the reason I was here was to keep an eye on Sylvester. Ferdinand had said that he was less likely to neglect his duties when I was around. Incidentally, now that Ferdinand no longer needed to read my headache-inducing reports each and every day, he was dedicating himself to gathering intelligence through socializing. Hey, Rosemine, Hartmut's report for today contains something I think you'll enjoy, Sylvester said with a grin, while handing over a reasonably thick stack of papers he had just been reading. I read them myself, then let out a cry of excitement. That's my Hartmut, he's so skilled. I can't believe he got love stories from Dunkelfegger this quickly. He's even sent them right to me. One of the apprentice scholars who had accompanied Handler during a Bookworm tea party had apparently been gathering Dunkelfegger romance stories. Hartmut had taken the time to send 2 with his report instead of waiting for me to return to the Royal Academy. And the name of the Dunkelfegger romance author who worked so hard to get these stories for me is, let's see, Clarissa. Okay, I've memorized her name. I'll talk to Mother about whether we can turn these into a book once I get back to my room. Right. Desperately holding back the urge to start reading the love stories right away, I turned my attention to a report from Wilfrid. He mentioned that he was busy competing with Ortwin of Dravankel. As it turned out, he was having quite a peaceful time at the Royal Academy now that I was gone. Not that I care which of them can make the cooler weapon. I read Marianne's report next, which informed me that the first years all finished their written lessons. It seemed they were struggling with their practical lessons, however. Charlotte was having a hard time in her stat morphing class, since everyone was expecting her to start some new trend or another. I decided to take the opportunity to inform her about maternal symbols and suggested that she spread them among the first-year girls. Rosemary, let's put aside our work for a bit. Sylvester said his 5th bell, which marked our break time. Having this opportunity to speak with him was perhaps the most valuable part of this winter because, after careful consideration, I realized that one-on-one time was something we had pretty much never had. It was actually pretty fun talking to him while sipping tea and eating sweets. Rosemine, how's the playroom? Sylvester asked, munching on some tarts filled with falodes soaked in honey. I thought back to my time there that morning while drinking the tea that Riarda had prepared for me. Professor Moritz is keeping things running smoothly even without any Archduke candidates there, I said. The children's studies are progressing well. Nice, that's good to hear. How are you doing at building up your stamina? Not as well. I'm putting my all into it, though. Then again, Ferdinand did say I'm not showing enough effort. I smiled at this cover and swiftly changed the subject. Speaking of which, Riarda told me this morning to select my future retainers from the playroom. Yeah, you're gonna need some. You're gonna need more, Sylvester replied. You pick people based on your own inscrutable standards. But just be careful with your choices. We don't want to end up with another Troggot. Yeah, he agrees too. It seemed that other people couldn't work out my thought process for picking retainers, especially when I had chosen lay nobles like Daniel and Feline and was letting Roderick give me his name, despite him being from the former Veronica faction. That is easier said than done. We have so many Archduke candidates of a similar age that there aren't many options. Melkor would need retainers soon, no? Have you not already decided on the candidates? I was aware that Melkor was being baptized this spring. He would move into the northern building afterward and take on retainers, so we were more or less battling to secure the best ones. Once I've taken to someone, I'm willing to pick them regardless of their status, but I know I'm not in a position to say that, I continued. I might not have cared about such things, but others certainly did, and status was essential when it came to diplomacy with other duchies in the Royal Academy. I needed at least one Archnoble attendant, scholar, and guard knight, so I had an idea. What if Melkor and I were to share an Archnoble retainer in the Royal Academy? Sylvester spat out his tea, and Riarda paused midway through serving to balk at me. Milady, what in the world are you talking about, she asked. Sharing retainers? I know that we cannot share attendants because we are not of the same gender, but Melkor's apprentice guard knights and scholars won't have any duties at the Royal Academy before he starts attending himself, no? Thus, I will take them into my service and train them in the process. Of course, they would only be serving me in the Royal Academy. More crazy talk from you. It's always crazy talk. Sylvester grumbled, massaging his temples as one of his retainers wiped his mouth. What? Seriously, Sylvester, you can't wipe your mouth on your own either? Dear Lord! No wonder people get freaking lazy in that world. Or that would be something, to induce laziness. Because, they change you, they dress you, they bathe you, they wipe your freaking mouth what are they, your attendants or your mothers? It may have been an unusual suggestion, but in my opinion, it's very logical. There are only so many Archnoble retainers in the Royal Academy, are there not? Melkor won't be entering the Academy until my final year, so this would greatly benefit us both. And what about that final year, Riarda asked exasperated. All of your retainers will depart at once. Please do consider things a little more seriously. The last year certainly would introduce some complications, since I would need to return all of our shared attendants to Melkor, but I wasn't overly concerned. I don't imagine we would encounter that many problems, since only the Archnoble retainers would be leaving my service. I would still have my men nobles and lay nobles, I replied. Worst case scenario, I would simply borrow Archnoble retainers from Wilfrid or Charlotte when I needed them. Sylvester rejected my suggestion with a sigh. If you were Charlotte, I might have gone along with this, but it won't work with you, Rosamund. Why not? In the future, Charlotte's going to be married to another duchy, and since she'll only be able to bring a few retainers with her, it wouldn't be a big deal for her to share some scholars and guard knights with Melkor. But you're going to marry Wilfrid and stay in Arrynfest forever. It'll come back to bite you if you don't raise retainers to support you now while you still can. It seemed that one would get closer to, and therefore work better with, the retainers one went through the Royal Academy with, rather than the retainers one took on later. Well, I thought it was a good idea. The idea itself sounds fine, but it's not good for the future first wife of an Archduke, Sylvester said with a forced smile. I didn't really think much of my engagement to Wilfrid since it hadn't impacted my life at all, but it seemed that Sylvester already saw me as a soon-to-be first wife. It was kind of a strange thought. Reports arrived from the Royal Academy on a daily basis. Hildebrand was no longer leaving his room, as students had found out about his visits to the library and promptly swarmed the place. Hannelore had apparently been seen stroking Schwartz and Weiss, causing other girls to try for themselves, and received quite a shock in the most literal sense. Raymond, meanwhile, had finished his new assignments from Ferdinand and wanted them to be reviewed. Rosamund, this one's from Charlotte, Sylvester said as he handed me the report. Jawanko mentioned that royalty is looking to buy another hairpin from us. You can send the order to the Gilberta Company. Charlotte had received an invitation to a tea party with Jawanko, during which they were going to discuss the first Prince Sigiswald wanting to give Adolphine a hairpin at her graduation ceremony. They had planned to hold this tea party with me, but my return to Arrynfest had come too abruptly. This was a tricky situation. Jawanko was asking for a hairpin at the behest of Prince Sigiswald, so we couldn't refuse on the grounds of their duchy not being part of the trade agreement. We couldn't outright say that we didn't want Jawanko researching our hairpins either. I have not received an order for a hairpin at a tea party before, so I would appreciate your advice, sister, from Charlotte. Charlotte had gone out of her way to send this report to me as her older sister. I would need to put my all into my response. attend the tea party with Brunhilde, and ask Lady Adolphine her favorite flower and what kind of clothes she intends to wear as her graduation ceremony. Pay close attention to their color and design. My attendants know what is needed to order a hairpin that will suit an outfit, so you needn't worry about that. And fear not, I will speak with the Gilberta Company. From Rosemine. Brunhilde could write up a proper order form without issue. It was those of the Gilberta Company who would struggle the most. I will contact the Gilberta Company in advance, so it will take a few days for Charlotte to attend the tea party and for Brunhilde to send the order form, I said. That will give the Gilberta Company time to check their thread stores and inform the craftswoman of the job. All right, Sylvester replied. It will be hard to send word out in this blizzard, though. Feel free to use a magic letter if you don't need a response. His scholars immediately began preparing a magic letter. After writing my message, it would turn into a white bird that would fly even to commoners. Of course, a commoner wouldn't be able to reply since they lacked the necessary mana, but for nobles, one would include response paper that only needed a little bit of mana to be activated in a similar fashion. Which reminds me, the letter that Lady Georgine sent to Bezin wants to come some response paper with it. I gratefully accepted the magic letter and wrote to the Gilberta Company explaining that we would soon receive another order from royalty and that I would send the more detailed order form over to them in a few days. I also mentioned that I would need extra library committee armbands. The royals are being extra pushy again this year. Sorry, Thule. As I was internally lamenting my poor sister's situation, fifth bell rang. It was time for tea. I didn't think we would receive another order from royalty this year, I said offhandedly. You're surprisingly bad at predicting the future. The second prince gave his to Klassenberg. It's not too hard to guess that the first prince would do the same for an archduke candidate from Drawonkel. You saw this coming at least a little bit, surely. I didn't. Sorry. We've entered a business agreement with the sovereignty, so I wish they'd communicated this in the summer through their merchants, Sylvester said, but if they were looking to make contact with you in the process, making this order at the Royal Academy is a surefire way of getting two birds with one stone. This is all too sudden for the craftspeople, I complained with pursed lips. If only we'd received the order sooner. Sylvester laughed. You seem pretty worried about this, but they made a great hairpin last year, didn't they? What, do you not trust your own personnel anymore? I do trust them. My personal hairpin craftswoman is the best there is. Then there's nothing to worry about, Sylvester said, and then downed his cup of tea. Somehow his words convinced me that everything really would be okay. My Thule really is the best, so yeah, it'll be fine. By the way, I hear that you're refusing to meet any of the Giebs, Sylvester continued. That's right, I have nothing to say about the Haldensdale miracle, and it is not up to me to decide which provinces I visit for spring prayer. I cannot have Ferdinand accompany me to every single meeting. I heard about it from Florencia. He sat down his cup and then cleared the room. It seemed that it was time for a secret conversation. The scholars and the attendants left without much commotion. Karstedt, Angelica, you leave as well. This is my first time seeing Karstedt be sent out of a private talk like this. I watched him go with wide eyes, and then set down my cup and straightened my back. Has something happened in relation to Haldensdale? Yep, Sylvester replied, and a few Giebs are really intent on securing a meeting about it. He cleared the room for that? As I tilted my head in confusion, Sylvester awkwardly cleared his throat. The provinces that only need advice from Gieb Haldensdale to revise their old ceremonies are fine. Instead, the problems come from provinces that already smashed their ceremonial stages for one reason or another. They can't fix them on their own, so they want to discuss the matter with you, the High Bishop. I mean, I don't have a clue how to fix them either. And what kind of idiot would destroy stages used for ceremonies in the first place, I asked, grimacing a bit despite myself. I struggled to believe that anyone would do something so moronic in a world where you could pray to the gods and immediately receive their blessings. The Giebs who broke them deserved whatever happened to them as a result. Sylvester, seeing my naked anger, let out a sigh. You're right, it was stupid of them. But religious ceremonies weren't seen as all that important before you became the High Bishop. It was the Giebs' job to create and protect large-scale magic tools for their province. Repairing stages wasn't my burden, and I didn't have time to waste on Giebs who couldn't even carry out their own duties. I was busy transcribing the Dunkelfelder book I was borrowing from Hannelore. I still needed to research Professor Solange's documents, and I wanted to reread Elvira's new book a few more times. I simply did not have the leeway for a bunch of meetings. Unfortunately, the Bible does not explain how to recreate the stages, nor is it the job of the High Bishop to maintain them, I said. The Giebs will need to research their own histories and figure out how to recreate the stage themselves. So you don't know anything about them either, huh? Not even the smallest detail. Although the Bible contains some pictures of ceremonies alongside the stories of the gods, there are no instructions for making the stages or their magic circles. If there were, I would have told someone, and Ferdinand would gleefully be researching them as we speak. Do not expect so much from saints in the Bible, I said, waving my hand dismissively. Sylvester nodded with a solemn expression. Right. But you know, Rosemine, these requests from the Giebs are important, and while searching in the Bible for descriptions of the ceremonial stages May not be your job. This is an order from the Ob himself. Jerk. He then leaned forward, his dark green eyes gleaming, and added in a low voice, "At least that's the excuse I'll give so that you can go back to the temple and secure some reading time." Oh? What a wondrous excuse. The past few days have made it more than clear enough that Ferdinand infected you with his work obsession. You need to relax a bit more while he's distracted with socializing. I mean, we called you back from the Royal Academy so you could rest. Yeah? Sylvester grinned and then put on a serious face. "I hereby order you to pore over the Bible at the temple. I pray from the bottom of my heart that you discover some information about the ceremony and the stages. Your wish is my command, Albarenfest." Oh, Sylvester is a bit conniving here. Nice. Just as investigating the Bible. Just as instructed, I would stealthily return to the temple without Ferdinand noticing to reclaim my reading time. I talked with Sylvester to arrange a line of communication with the temple such that he could send over the hairpin order form once it was ready, then went to gather my retainers so they could start preparing. Abba Ehrenfest has instructed me that I search the Bible for answers to the Gieb's questions about the Haldensdale miracle, I said solemnly. From tomorrow morning onward, I am going to be at the temple for some time. A smile betrayed my true feelings as I picked up my book from Dunkelfelder, saw on his documents, and so on. At Sylvester's orders, I would soon get to indulge in a paradise of reading until the dedication ritual. His primary objective was for me to get some rest, so although I would investigate the Bible a little bit, there was no obligation for me to actually find anything. But if you do find something, that'd be great. But if not, oh well. Can't help it. It's not there. Yippee! Daniel and Angelica needed to prepare as well, since they were going to be joining me for my duration in the temple. I had also sent word to Ella in the kitchen. Our plan was to depart tomorrow morning. "This certainly is sudden," Ottilie remarked. Riarda shook her head with exasperation. "Is Milady's departure for the temple not always sudden? We should be used to it by now." "I apologize for the rush," I said. "My hope is to find answers before the next spring prayer, and there simply isn't much time left. I will need to return to the World Academy after the dedication ritual, after all." That night, I ate dinner alone in my room since the archducal couple had been invited to a dinner meeting elsewhere. It was strangely lonesome since I would normally eat dinner with at least Wilfried while I was in the castle. In the end, I started to wish I could return to the World Academy, purely to have company during mealtimes if nothing else. Come morning, my preparations for staying at the temple were complete, and we left while following Daniel and Angelica on their high-beasts. Traveling in the fearsome blizzard was as difficult as usual, and if not for their dark yellow capes, I would not have known where I was flying. It made me wonder how the knights could make it to the temple. "Welcome back, Lady Rosemine." My attendants greeted me when I arrived, all standing in the freezing cold. "And so I have returned," I replied, walking along the path that Daniel and Angelica made for me while taking care not to trip. This time I managed to get to the temple without falling flat on my face. My muscles might be coming back to me. Although there were fewer stumbles to speak of, the walk to the temple still took me a lot longer than it would a normal person. My coat was covered in snow by the time I stepped inside, so Monica removed it from me and then brushed the remaining snow from my clothes. As I watched the snow tumble to my feet, Zahn looked around as if searching for something. "Lady Rosemine, is the High Priest not with you?" he asked. "He is busy with socializing, and will more than likely remain in the Noble's Quarter until the dedication ritual," I replied. "I have returned to investigate the Bible at the Ob's orders." "You want to investigate the Bible?" Fran repeated, blinking curiously. "We made spring come early in Haldensdale through spring prayer, and the Giebs wished to perform the ceremony as well," I said, explaining the Haldensdale miracle. "I am going to be researching the Bible carefully so it can be recreated. I already compared those in the bookroom during my Blue Shrine Maiden days, but I must finish before the dedication ritual, so I do not have much time." "Time certainly is of the essence, then," Fran said with a nod. "Oh, they have no idea." I entered the High Bishop's chambers, changed into my High Bishop's robes, and then listened to everyone's reports while enjoying the tea Nicola had prepared for me. According to Gil, we had been told to avoid visiting the planting company for a bit, since they had gotten a new Lahange. We needed to wait until Lutz came with a message. "The planting company does not want our information leaking to them," Gil said. "It's just who is this Lahange anyway?" I mused. They had already allowed the Gilmaster's grandson Damien to get super involved, and I couldn't imagine anyone who would want to be more on guard against him than him. "What? It seems to be the daughter of a Klassenberg merchant." A Klassenberg merchant? What? Why would you hire someone like that, Benno?" "There was some kind of extreme circumstances," Gil noted. Lutz said that he doesn't know the details either. "I see. Hopefully everything ends up fine." I finished my tea while listening to the reports, then had Fran fetch the fancy, face-stone-protected Bible for me. He took it from its shrine and placed it carefully in front of me with the key next to it. I could feel my mana being drained as I slid the key into the lock. I opened the thick cover while humming to myself, resolved to skim the usual contents of the Bible a single time before saying there was nothing more I could do. But instead, I saw something completely unlike what I remembered. "What in the world?" I muttered, my eyes wide. "Is something the matter, Lady Rosamond?" Fran asked without hesitation. His eyes were curiously flitting between the Bible and me, at which point I remembered Ferdinand saying that the High Bishop's Bible was only able to be read by those who had received permission. In other words, Fran couldn't see its contents at all. At the same time, I recalled that Ferdinand had taken care to ensure that only nobles learned about magecraft and gave a heavy sigh. "Not at all, Fran," I replied with a fake smile, then returned to examining the Bible. A magic circle had appeared floating above the page when it opened it, but that wasn't all. Above the words written in ink that I had seen previously, there were different words written in mana. I felt a chill run down my spine at the sudden change. Hold on just a minute. What's going on here? Has anything major changed since my becoming the High Bishop? The Bible was a magic tool, so I desperately searched through my memories, trying to think of something that might have impacted it. I was now attending the Royal Academy, and had acquired a staff to become a proper noble. That was probably the biggest change. I had gotten my staff, learned to better control my mana, and gained the ability to do a whole range of things. No, that's not it. I started and shook my head. I was confident that I had read the Bible since obtaining my staff. This magic circle hadn't been there when I checked the Bible with Ferdinand after the spring prayer ceremony in Haldensale. He surely would have mentioned it otherwise. Did something happen, Lady Rosamond? Is something wrong? Angelica asked, and rushed over. She had a sharp look in her eyes as she glanced between the Bible and me, and the seriousness with which she had called out spurred Daniel to walk over with an equally curious expression. "Angelica, can you see what's written?" I asked. She glanced at the Bible through narrowed eyes, and then shook her head without even averting her gaze. "I don't see anything. The pages are all completely blank." "Is it not the case that only those with your permission as High Bishop can see the pages, Lady Rosamond?" Daniel asked. I recall Lord Ferdinand saying as much. I gave a curt nod in response. I was just confirming that they couldn't actually see it. "In that case, I grant Angelica permission to read the Bible," I said. "Do you see anything now?" "I see complicated words." It seemed she could now see the words, but not the magic circle. With that confirmed, I then granted Daniel permission to read the Bible. "Do you see anything?" I asked. "I see the sentences. Here be words granted by the gods." As it turned out, Daniel couldn't see the magic circle either. I could guess then that seeing it had nothing to do with having a staff or being a noble. Still, I was far from working out why it had appeared all of a sudden. "I revoke my permissions," I said. "What's going on, Lady Rosamond?" Angelica asked. I gazed up at her. "I see now why you elected to abandon thinking after your graduation, Angelica," I replied, trying to avoid giving an actual answer. "Right. Guess I'll need to discuss this with Ferdinand, so you'll have to wait until he gets back." Such was my mantra in times of doubt, but first I needed to read some of the new words. "Ye who wish to be Zent, read on." "Oh, no, I don't want to be king." I replied to the book in my head while reading on. I didn't intend to become the Zent, which is the king, which is what they called the king here. But books existed to be read. This text was unknown to me, and my wish was to read unknown texts. I'll skip the magic circle, though, since it's too complex for me to understand. I can just ask Ferdinand about it later. Is she going to become a Zent candidate? Holy shit! Oh my god, things just keep changing for her. Dear Lord. At most, I understood that the circle involved all the elements at once. I turned to the next page, and more new words rose into the air. There was no magic circle this time. I read the text, which basically said that becoming the Zent would require me to pray endlessly to the gods. Huh? Endlessly? Anyone who wished to be the Zent needed to raise their mana capacity as high as possible, which could be done by offering countless prayers to the gods. I didn't really understand how that would work, but it was possible, apparently. Once your vessel stopped growing and your mana stopped increasing, you would pray again, and a path would open that led to the gods. They would then give you what was needed to wield the power of the Zent. Incidentally, if the path to the gods did not open, it meant you weren't qualified to be the Zent. But what are those qualifications? Ooh, things are getting interesting! I can't wait to see Ferdinand's face when he finds out about this. Oh, is he going to have a headache? Is he going to have a headache from this? Is he going to be excited? Is he going to have no expression at all? What's going to happen? Once you had the divine strength necessary to wield the power of the Zent, you had to pray to the gods once again. Then, with enough effort, the gods would grant you their wisdom. It was written that only those with both the required power and wisdom can finally be recognized as a Zent. Somehow, it feels like you do nothing but pray. I mean, that's what you do. There were probably hints for becoming king. I understood the general process, but since none of the details were written clearly, I didn't entirely follow. It wasn't as if anyone could become king. Perhaps it was written vaguely on purpose. Maybe this was all obvious to everyone back then, and those roundabout instructions could provide the extra knowledge needed to know what to do. But, well, I'm not going to be king anyway, so I don't really care about these instructions. As unclear as the floating letters were, I knew one thing for certain. They were completely unrelated to Haldenzel's ceremony. In that case, I'll focus on Sylvester's instructions, I said, ceasing to care as soon as I finished reading the text. None of it had anything to do with me. I thought that saving the magic circles would make sense, but I couldn't work on that while Fran and the others were around, and the very thought of taking this Bible to my workshop made me groan. I can just wait until Ferdinand comes back. I'll start looking into Haldenzel in the meantime. And so I flipped through the Bible, searching for the part where the goddess of earth, subordinate gods, prayed to the goddess of water as per Haldenzel's ceremony. I found it almost instantly. I had read the relevant passage over and over again for confirmation, and then read it again. There were lyrics and the illustrations, but still no details about how to make the stages. Whoever wrote this probably didn't expect anyone to break their precious ceremonial stages in the first place. Having finished reviewing the Bible again, I decided to spend the afternoon reading the documents I had borrowed from Solange. It was my motto to prioritize reading things that had been lent to me so that I could return them properly. I read the work reports of the libraries from generations ago with a pen in hand, ready to make notes about any magic tools that were previously used. The reports were exceedingly fun to read since they offered a glimpse into the average day of librarians for the past. First and foremost, they needed to ensure the library was ready to be opened before classes began at 2:30 bell. It was a morning ritual for the librarians to divide the magic tools among themselves and start filling them with mana. They started with the large-scale magic tools built into the library building itself, such as the light magic tool that indicated the time, the magic tools that cleaned the grounds, the magic tool that quieted loud voices in the reading room, and so on. Next, the librarians unlocked the reading room, poured mana into Schwartz and Weiss, and then had the two shoemills go around opening the doors and preparing to lend out books. That must have been very cute. The very thought brought a smile to my face. As Schwartz and Weiss were preparing the first floor, the rest of the librarians continued servicing the magic tools one by one. There were the bookshelves that prevented old documents from rotting away with time-stopping magic, and even a magic tool that stopped sunlight from damaging books. I definitely wanted those in the Rosemine library. I wonder if the Gramps Schwartz and Weiss mentioned is one of the magic tools these librarians used to pour mana into. I thought back to the Grudeshite hugging Mr. Norris statue on the second floor of the reading room. Solange had mentioned before that not all the magic tools were being resupplied due to the shortage of available librarians, and since Schwartz and Weiss had taken me to that statue in particular, it was easy to assume that this Gramps was in reality the most valuable magic tool in the library. It seems I've already been doing some proper librarian work. Thinking about it that way maybe put me in pretty high spirits. I kept reading on, all the while writing down the different magic tools that were once been used in the library. Once the students began to arrive, things started to sound a lot more familiar. Return books were put on their shelves, corrals were lent out, study guides brought in by students were looked over, professors sent out ordinances asking for certain documents to be prepared. These reports painted a truly wonderful picture of everyday life in the library. It's so nice. I want a life like that too. As Solange had said previously, having enough librarians meant they had more than enough time to do their jobs, or so the reports had mentioned some librarians leaving the library to have information exchanging tea parties with other professors or with students. One new discovery was that the Archnoble librarians only worked in the Royal Academy until the time of the Archduke Conference, at which point they moved to work in the Palace Library instead. They moved between the two libraries depending on the season, but men noble and lay noble scholars simply remained at their posts. In other words, Professor Solange always worked in the Royal Academy's library, while other librarians were always working in the palace libraries. Given that no archnoble librarians were being sent to work in the Royal Academy's library, I could imagine that men noble librarians in the Royal Academy were having a hard time themselves. It would be pretty rough for a few men nobles to keep up with all the magic tools written here. By reading these documents, I also learned that the elder generation was very different from our current one. Back then, students would get their divine wills right before graduation, and it was explained that the students would raise their newly acquired staffs in celebration during the graduation ceremony. Yet, these days, even first years have staffs. The reports also mentioned that adult royals had a duty to attend the Archduke Conference, and described as an instance of one visiting the library. 3 archnoble librarians had apparently greeted them. And now we have Schwartz and Weiss welcoming Prince Hildebrand. That's much cuter. My blissful fantasizing was suddenly interrupted as someone shook me by the shoulders. I looked up in shock and said, "What is it, Fran?" Fran silently pointed at an ordinance that had landed on my desk. Rosamund, did I not ask you to keep an eye on Sylvester? It said, relaying a message to Ferdinand that was cold enough to be described as absolute zero. Just hearing it made my inhale sharply. Tell me, where have you gone? Are you with him now? Wait, what? Seeing that Sylvester had run away somewhere right after sending me back to the temple. Sylvester, you idiot! Where did you go? Where could he have gone? Seriously, where did he go? Where could he have gone off to? Because the only place I can think of is the temple, and he's not there. Sylvester, you just screwed her and you just screwed yourself and you screwed Rosamund too. Great. Now they're both in trouble. Great. Oh, yeah. Sylvester, you colossal moron. I regret improving my opinion of you even slightly. Now I'm going to get an absolute earful from Ferdinand. I could already picture it. Sylvester casually strolling back into his office just as Ferdinand finished venting his anger. He was a master of skipping work and evading consequences, two areas in which I was painfully lacking. I couldn't make his expert excuses or deftly sidestep anger as he did. Come to me at once, the message finished. It then repeated itself twice more before returning to the form of a yellow face stone. Lady Rosamund, did you truly return here on the Ob's orders? Fran asked suspiciously. Yes! Yes! I nodded repeatedly, trying to assure everyone that I was telling the truth. But Sylvester had given his orders after clearing the room of everyone, including my guards. Nobody knew that he had told me to return to the temple, and if he played dumb, everyone would assume I was lying. But I didn't do anything wrong! One could argue that I had been too naive, accepting Sylvester's order for me to return to the temple without suspecting that he was just trying to escape my watchful eyes. But that still didn't mean I had done anything wrong. The fault was always Sylvester. I didn't do anything wrong, but Ferdinand is going to yell at me and send me back to the castle and punish me by removing all of my reading time. What should I do? I need to get out of this somehow. I gripped the Ordinance face stone, desperately racking my brain while a cold sweat ran down my back, trying to think of something I could say to avoid Ferdinand unleashing his wrath on me and making me return to the castle. Oh, I know. I can show Ferdinand this magic circle. Then he'll forget all about being mad at me. I produced my staff and tapped the face stone, filling it with mana and turning it into an ivory bird. On Sylvester's orders, I was told to investigate the Bible. I said, speaking my message. I discovered something of shocking importance and wish to discuss it with you as soon as possible. Ferdinand, please come back soon. As I thought about more excuses to use, the Ordinance returned from Ferdinand and told me to wait in my room as he would be heading to the temple immediately. Fran and Zom went to report this to his attendants and prepare tea in the kitchen. I watched them out of the corner of my eye while focusing on the Ordinance's voice and trying to judge how angry Ferdinand was through his tone. It feels like surprise and urgency is overcoming his anger a little bit, I ventured. He still seems more annoyed than anything, but it's hard to say. What do you think, Daniel? Wouldn't it be best to stop this vain struggle and accept his scolding? No, it would not be. I have done absolutely nothing wrong this time, I argued. There is no reason for me to be scolded. Then you have no reason to avoid Lord Ferdinand, Daniel replied, shaking his head as though he didn't want to deal with this. I pursed my lips. I'm trying to avoid his scolding precisely because I've done nothing wrong. Then do your best, Lady Rosamund, Angelica interjected, clenching her fist in the show of support. I'm on your side. Okay, you're on my side, but can you actually do anything? I asked without thinking. Angelica's brow trembled. Unfortunately, I'm too dumb to counter a lecture from Lord Ferdinand, she said. He's just too smart. I can bring out Stenlock and do my best to fight the losing battle, or I can sit next to you and we can enjoy the lecture together. Which would you prefer, Lady Rosamund? Neither! As we were having our pointless conversation, a bell rang to signal a visitor. Fran and Zom opened the door through which Ferdinand entered. He was with Eckert, Justice, and his temple attendants. I did nothing wrong this time, okay? I exclaimed. Save your excuses for later. Begin with the greeting as is proper, he said, lecturing me about something entirely unrelated to the problem at hand, despite my best efforts to avoid earning his ire. It doesn't make any sense. How did this happen? We exchanged lengthy noble greetings, then I offered Ferdinand a seat. He let out a long sigh in response. Okay, I said, now that we've finished our greetings, I will report my... Enough, Ferdinand said. I was a fool to trust you with monitoring him in the first place. You are single-minded and easy to deceive. All one must do is dangle a book in front of your eyes, and you will carelessly leap onto it, thinking nothing of your circumstances or the consequences. I think I just frittered away the last scraps of trust I didn't even know he still placed in me. Ferdinand, I take it back. You can yell at me, I said, fearing from his thoroughly exasperated expression that he was on the verge of abandoning me forever. That would be a waste of time, he said, now looking very annoyed. More importantly, what is this shocking revelation of which you speak? The problem with you is that I cannot predict its actual severity from your words alone. What do you mean? I asked, confused. In my eyes, he was always able to see 3 steps ahead, so it was strange to hear him say he couldn't figure out my meaning. Some things that are shocking to you are trivial to others, he explained. In other cases, they are so unbelievable that normal men cannot even fathom them. It is nigh impossible to predict which is applicable with you. So what is it this time? I can't give you an answer that you'd find useful. They are all shocking revelations to me, I grumbled to Ferdinand, then opened the Bible. Both he and Justice leaned forward in interest. Blank, it seems, Justice commented. Can you see anything, Ferdinand, I asked. No, as one would expect, he replied. You have to not given me your permission as the High Bishop. Milady, Justice said, give me your permission too if you would. After confirming that Ferdinand couldn't see anything, I said, I grant Ferdinand and Justice permission to read, while watching his face carefully. An instant later, his brow twitched, although just a hair. For the most part, his expression remained unchanged, so I couldn't say for sure whether he could see the magic circle. So this is the Bible only the High Bishop can see, What makes it different from other Bibles, Justice asked. He was eagerly flipping through the pages, but his response proved that he couldn't see the magic circle or the text in the air. It is a more complete version, or at the very least it has more details than any of the transcriptions in the temple's bookroom, I replied. There were several transcriptions of the Bible in the temple's bookroom, but their pages counts varied quite dramatically. Ferdinand gazed at me and said, Rose mine, in a voice completely without emotion. I turned with a start. His light golden eyes were looking down at me without betraying even the slightest expression. He shut them tightly once, then picked up the Bible. We cannot speak of this to anyone. You understand, correct? He asked with a quiet intensity that left no room for debate, and with that, I knew for sure he can see the text and magic circle too. Ferdinand entered the hidden room of the High Bishop's chambers without permitting any of our retainers to follow. They stayed behind looking utterly confused as I followed after him. After setting the Bible on the large table for brewing and opening it, Ferdinand swiftly sat in a chair. I pulled a second chair over to the opposite side of the table and then climbed onto it. Rosamund, what do you see? He asked. The same thing as you, I think. There are words and a magic circle in the air. Ferdinand started massaging his brow. These were not there when we read the Bible before. I am just as surprised as you are. I came here to read the Bible as Sylvester's orders and did not expect this magic circle to be there at all. Still, you can see it even though Angelica, Daniel, and the Justice could not. For a moment I was starting to believe that only I could see it as the High Bishop. After a pause, I stared up at Ferdinand. He had fallen silent, not even taking the time to respond. Perhaps there is some condition or... I trailed off awkwardly. Ferdinand was staring at me, still not saying a word, with a face that was completely devoid of emotion. His stony gaze was scarier than any he had given me before, such that I could feel goosebumps rise all across my skin. What is wrong? Ferdinand. Ye who wish to be Zent, do you wish to rule Rosemine? Ferdinand asked, his voice colder than ice. Ooh. I swallowed hard. He was asking quietly, but I had no idea what he would do depending on my answer. Somehow I got the feeling I was standing on an exceedingly dangerous cliff edge. Yeah, I don't know what he would do if you were to say yes. And I don't know what you would do if you were to say no. So we're in a very scary situation. Is that the magic circle? If it is, wow. It's big. I don't want to rule at all, I eventually replied. I only want to read. Then forget what you saw today. This Bible produced no floating magic circle, nor any words. This is an act you must maintain. Is that understood? His tone had softened ever so slightly after hearing my answer, but even so, he was unilaterally cutting the conversation short. The way he stood up and moved to shut the Bible made it seem as though he no longer cared about the magic circle at all. I did not mind forgetting, but I trailed off again, confused as to why Ferdinand was so interested in the intricate, surely fantastical magic circle. I had mentioned it in the hope of diverting his anger, but it was doing a very poor job. Do you not want to research the magic circle? It seems extremely complex, what with it using all elements at once, so I thought you would have leaped at the chance. Rosamund, there are many things in the world that one is better off not knowing. Do not stick your nose into these matters if you wish to live. Death can come swiftly from any direction. Death? Seeing that I couldn't connect researching a magic circle to an untimely demise, Ferdinand gave a lengthy sigh and sat back down. I will explain this only as you do not seem to know. But the current king has not fulfilled the qualifications to be the Zent. What? He does not meet the criteria written here. As the Bible described, the position of Zent was given to those who transcribed the original Grudishite. Ferdinand explained that over the long years, hence this has morphed into the current Zent, passing his transcribed version down to the next. The passed down Grudishite itself had become the symbol of the Zent. Remember that thing that they mentioned about the, what was it called? What was it? Bible fundamentalists? The ones who think that the king is supposed to live as the Bible says? This is what it means, I think. is what they're talking about. I think. I could be wrong. Let me know. This transcription had been lost during the Civil War following the previous king's death. Now the current king needs to transcribe a new one from the original Grutashite. But its location remained unknown. It was possible that the royals had passed the knowledge down among themselves, but it was also very likely that this information had ended up lost in the Civil War. There are many things that one archduke passes on to the next, Ferdinand explained. I imagine that kings do the same. However, the current king was raised as a vassal up until the Civil War. He was not trained to be king and was placed on the throne under extremely abrupt circumstances. It was very likely that he does not know these oral traditions. The current king had been put on the throne immediately after winning the Civil War, but the biblical fundamentalists, yeah, that's what I'm thinking about, and the Sovereign Temple had apparently once rejected his rule due to the fact he lacked a Grutashite. They rejected him once, but due to the drastic shortage of royals and nobles, nearly half of all important magic tools could no longer function, Ferdinand continued. The country would not survive if nothing was done, so the Sovereign Temple bitterly relented and accepted his rule. Peace is somehow being maintained under the reign of a king without a Grutashite. Now imagine that you publicize the conditions for properly becoming king and reveal what is written in the Bible. I suspect you can predict what will happen next. Doing such a thing would call the current king's legitimacy into question and stir the biblical fundamentalists of the Sovereign Temple into action. The king would no doubt want me killed before I caused any problems, and the mere thought of that violent end sent me shuddering. Ferdinand, does the Bible showing me these things mean I fulfill the requirements for becoming king, I asked. Is that why you're so on guard? Ferdinand shook his head. No, that is not the case. You have plentiful mana, all elemental affinities, and, on top of everything, pray to the gods often as the Bible describes. You certainly have all the qualities necessary to become king. However, there is one crucial condition that you have not fulfilled. And what condition is that? I asked, looking at the Bible curiously. It is simple, Ferdinand said. You were born a commoner and thus do not have royal blood. For that reason, you cannot be king. Royal blood? The Bible doesn't say anything about needing that. Ferdinand tapped a finger against his temple in contemplation, then let out a sigh. In the same way that only certain people can enter this hidden room, the Grutashite is like within an archive that only royalty can enter, or so an ancient text maintains. In other words, you will not be able to enter the archive, nor will you be able to transcribe the book. No matter how many kingly qualities you may have, you cannot become king. What? Are you talking about the Forbidden Archives there? I exclaimed. I thought Prince Hildebrand would let me in now that we're friends, but if that's true, I won't be able to go inside even if we do find it. This was one of the last things I had expected. All of my plans to find the archive during my time in the Royal Academy had suddenly been torn to shreds. Ferdinand gave me a suspicious look. Did you not say a moment ago that you have no wish to become the Saint? I don't, but I do want to read new books. Isn't it obvious that I want to read the Grutashite too? God, why don't I have royal blood? You guys are not royal. Because you were born a commoner, Ferdinand replied simply and shook his head. However, allow me to say that I am grateful from the bottom of my heart that you do not carry royal blood within you. Besides, the Grutashite in the archive is the first king's transcription, so we can assume that it is nearly identical to this Bible we have with us. Give up this foolish endeavor of yours. Ferdinand wasn't even close to taking the matter seriously enough. Nothing could be worse than the absolute despair of there being a book-filled archive that I was unable to enter. Have a little more consideration, please, I said. I'm emotionally devastated. I am the one devastated here. I am the devastated one here, Rosamine. My remaining hope that you might one day show a shred of normalcy has been completely dashed. It just got worse. At this point, no matter how much I expressed my sorrow, I could only expect insult in return. I pressed my lips closed and glared at Ferdinand, but he glared back as if challenging me to complain more. I averted my eyes and silently wished that I could avert the subject too. Still, why did those words in the magic circle start coming out of the Bible, I asked. I imagine you fulfilled some qualification, although I do not know the specifics. I have never been the High Bishop, nor have I owned the Bible. However, I feel that I now understand why these Bibles exist, Ferdinand said, brushing the book with his fingertips. The words and magic circle guide one down the path to become the Zent. They must exist so that the correct Zent can be crowned. I still don't understand. This is just a theory, Ferdinand said. But the first Zent was also a high bishop who served the gods. I believe you studied this in history. Yes, the king's children then performed religious ceremonies in the temple, right? That's why even in other duchies, the position of high bishop was given to the archduke's children. This much was evident from Eglantine saying that the children of archdukes serving as high bishop was the ancient way of the world. back in the day when every duchy followed the tradition. In the temple, kings and archdukes were equivalent, so children of the king would similarly serve as high bishop. Even if there were civil wars and conflicts that silenced oral tradition, as long as the children of kings continued to serve as high bishops, the Bible would reveal to them the path to the Grotesheit, Ferdinand explained. I am sure the first-generation king never imagined that the temple would lose its power and end up so hostile against the crown, nor that a commoner such as you would one day become high bishop and possess the qualities necessary to become king. Put like that, I really started to sound abnormal. Well, maybe I was, just a little bit. A little bit? I'd say a lot! Furthermore, the archdukes in the distant past were married to those of royal blood, Ferdinand continued. In other words, one could say that more or less all children of archdukes have royal blood to some extent. Perhaps the first king distributed these Bibles to each duchy such that the strongest of all those with his blood would be chosen as the king. Distributing Bibles to each archduke was a highly effective approach, even just in terms of preserving information. The first-generation king might have been a surprisingly intelligent person indeed. Speaking of which, I said, this is truly ancient history, but I read that one of the past kings was from Dunkelfelder. It was in one of their history books. I was curious to see why he had come from another duchy, rather than being one of the king's children, but this explains it. Oh ho, your history book from Dunkelfelder. You had your scholars transcribe it, correct? I wish to borrow it, Ferdinand said, his eyes shining with curiosity. Certainly we may exchange books. His brow twitched. Have I not already lent you enough books? I am a glutton for new books. I will not miss even the slightest opportunity to obtain new reading material. Yes, I am well aware, Ferdinand said with a chuckle. He agreed to exchange a new book for the Dunkelfelder history book, but no sooner had we made this agreement than his expression changed completely. He looked gravely serious again, so I closed my mouth and straightened my back. Speak to nobody of what we have discussed and what we saw in the Bible. None may hear of this under any circumstances. I will forget what I saw. You must do the same. He was going to pretend that he hadn't seen anything either, apparently. I couldn't help but wonder how many secrets Ferdinand was likewise pretending to have forgotten. And as that thought ran through my mind, I gazed at the ink pot on my shelf. The ink pot I was forbidden from ever using. Nothing good will come from us involving ourselves in this. One wrong move, and Ehrenfest will experience a purge like those that followed the civil wars. What? I reacted on instinct, surprised to hear something so violent. Ferdinand stared at me with hard eyes. You are an archduke candidate with knowledge about how to become the true king, chosen by the gods with their divine mandate. In addition to this, you are a saint and a highly popular high bishop. To those in power, you will appear to be a revolutionary on the verge of usurpation. War would follow in your wake at the smallest movement. Do you wish to start a war now, when the first prince has safely been selected as the crown prince? No, I wish your book said nothing more, I said flatly. Good, then. Ferdinand stood up and walked over to me. I gazed up at him, curious, and after a moment's hesitation, he gently patted my head. Rosemine, read new books and forget all about the Bible. This is for your sake. I realized this was his clumsy way of consoling me and smiled, hoping to lighten the mood at least a little. You can count on me, I declared. Forgetting is my specialty. I was planning to read a lot before this report anyway. I called you over here saying this was an emergency, but really, I just didn't want to get yelled at. Uh-oh. You had to say it! You had to say that! Oh yeah, you gotta freaking tell him what Sylvester said. This is Sylvester's fault, you know. In an instant, the hand that had been patting my head gripped it instead. An instinctive escaped me, and when I gazed up, I saw Ferdinand giving me a terrifying smile. Oh no. His stone-faced expression had seemed scary enough, but this one was something else entirely. Oh ho, for you to reveal that yourself, you must truly wish to be yelled at. Not at all, that was just a joke. To ease tension a little, to settle things down, that's all. His fingers tightened their grip on my head. It hurt. Ouchies. Ferdinand's lips curved into a grin as he saw me get tragically teary-eyed. And who would I be to deny you your wish, he said. Sit there. Sorry. Talk about a huge blunder. After giving me a thorough lecture, Ferdinand returned to the castle to yell at Sylvester. And of course, in the end, I was the only one to receive a scolding. Sylvester returned several barrels later and explained that he had gone to an archive locked to everyone but the Archduke to search for documents on the ceremonial stages. He had predicted that I would only serve as a tremendous annoyance, so he had deliberately gotten rid of me before I could find out what he was doing. If only I'd known, then I never would have gone back to the temple. I would have stuck to Sylvester like glue. Ah! Oh, poor Rosemine. Poor Rosemine. And heck, this is where we get to learn all about that Zent stuff. Ooh, plot thickens. The Though, to be completely honest, yeah, this kind of cements the fact that the king does the king does need to be looking at the Bible more, and who knows? Who knows what'll happen? Anyway, I'll see y'all in the next one.